Sorry guys, sorry, I didn't realise the camera had gone down. Right, so if you're just picking up, I'm not sure how long this has been off for. Anyone been taking it?
About 5 minutes.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, for goodness sake, you should have said.
I have my hand up.
Oh, play. I thought you were answering one of my questions about characteristics.
Oh, I could have done that.
Right, you should have said, camera. Right, okay. Right, we're on characteristics, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we got to. And now we were talking about collusion. We had a great example about Willie Walsh and Sir Richard Branson.
Explain it again.
Sorry?
Explain it again.
Well, maybe we'll probably come upon it later in the video. Right. Okay, what about number 5 then? Oh yes, I've just said, ladies and gentlemen, just to recap a little bit, I said, how many of you are learning to drive? And I said, get this, I said, I bet you're all learning to drive, only one person put their hand up. Funny. So, if you're learning to drive, Mr. Coulson, how's that going?
It's going good, thanks.
Excellent. How many lessons have you had?
I can't remember, like 6 or 7.
6 or 7, excellent. So you're probably reasonably proficient now?
Yeah.
Excellent, okay. And what do you put into the car to make it go?
Diesel.
Petrol or diesel?
It depends on the car.
Okay, well, what about your car?
Well, it's not. I don't know, I didn't ask.
Really? Well, don't be misfueling, because it's about £250 to get your tank emptied and flushed out. If you ever put diesel into a petrol or vice versa, to get the engine flushed and cleaned out and refilled, it's about £250, so you need to be careful on that.
Have you done that before?
I haven't, no, thankfully. But I know a few people who have done it. It's more difficult to do now because the nozzle for diesel shouldn't fit into the nozzle for a petrol car. But if you've an older car, then it still does. So I think that can be a bit of a problem. So you just be driving down the road, you think, oh, you have just spent £50 filling the car up, and then you get 100 yards down the road, and then it starts to chug, and then stops, and that's the telltale sign of a misfuel, probably. If not something more expensive to fix. Now, in the petrol retail market, now I'm quite loyal to Shell because I have a Shell card thing. So every quarter I get, in fact I've just had it from them, every quarter I get a little letter from them, it's got a little voucher on it, £2.50 I got this time. So it's £2.50 off whenever I go to my next fuel fill. Now, as you'll know, the price of fuel, it's a scandal, the price of fuel at the moment, because it's at something like an 8 to 10 year high. The price of petrol is enormously expensive at the moment. £2.50 would just get you, wouldn't even get you, how much? Do you know how much petrol is per litre? Anybody?
Like 1.2, something like that.
1.2? 1.2 what's that, pounds? 1.2 pounds? Okay, do you mean £1.20?
Yeah.
Yes. It's between £1.20 and £1.30. So if I get £2.50, so that's every quarter. Well, do you know how much money I've spent in the petrol station in the last few months? You're talking hundreds of pounds and I get £2.50. I don't know why I'm loyal to Shell for that. But so I keep going back to Shell anyway. Every little bit helps. Is that a strap line for a company? Every little bit helps. Is that Tesco?
Is that it?
Is that Tesco?
I don't know.
Is it every little helps?
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. Well, every little helps. They want to try getting a few more cashiers on the tills. I tell you, I went the other day. Every little helps. There was about 4 cashiers on and about 300 people waiting to get through the tills. Fortunately, me being such a patient sort of bloke, that didn't really bother me, obviously. So, petrol, I'm sure you've noticed, Doesn't matter if you go to the local Shell or Asda or Esso around about Gateshead. They all charge pretty much the same. So shopping around for petrol is a bit of a waste of time. You use more petrol than you actually save money. It's not worth it. The only place that you pay real expensive amounts of petrol would be where?
On them little stops when you're like halfway down the motorway.
On them little stops, when you're halfway down the motorway, on those little stops, well, what do we call those motorway, Robert? Services. Now that's a great example actually, motorway services, thank you for raising that. That is a great example of a local monopoly. A local monopoly, motorway services. In the same way that in Wickham, I don't know how many Chinese restaurants there are, I don't think there are many, but because it's in a little village with quite a large local population, that's a local monopoly. So you can think about these things nationally and locally and regionally as well. Similarly, if I was to go, let's say I went on the weekend to Kielder Forest with my mate, Perfect Pete, and we had a blast up to Kielder on the back wheel of the motorcycle the whole way, and we got there and we needed a refill fuel stop. Well, we are basically at the behest of the local petrol station at Kielder, because if we don't fill up there, we won't get home. So they can therefore charge whatever they want. So that's another great example of a local monopoly. But as I was saying, to come back to the point, Esso, Shell, etc., they all charge the same thing. But there tends to be one company which will raise or lower its prices first of all. And then everyone else follows suit. And that one firm, what do you call that one firm who raises or lowers its price first? Okay, yes, so it sticks its toe in the water and takes the temperature of customer sentiment in that respect.
I was just going to make a point about...
It's called a price
leader?
Yes. Okay. So you tend to have price leadership, whereby one firm says, I think it's worth taking a bit of a chance here, let's put petrol up to 1.30 a litre. And then they do it, and they get away with it, and then everyone else says, hey, you know that Esso bloke up the road, his is 1.30, let's bang ours up to 1.30. And they all follow suit. Now when you all follow suit, you're pricing in, how would you describe that pricing structure? Sorry? Exactement. So that is known as parallel pricing. And so oftentimes you find that firms in oligopolistic markets, they don't really compete on price because they all basically charge the same. They're not competing on price. I mean, why do I go to Shell rather than Morrison's? Right, there's a Morrison's one quite close to me. Well, why do I go to Shell when they're both the same price? What's the attraction? Nicole, what's attracting me to Shell instead of Tesco or Asda or Sainsbury's for petrol? There's a Sainsbury's quite close. The 250 voucher. But you're right, it's about loyalty. And just because I've got in my wallet, I've got it with me, a loyalty card, that keeps me loyal. Now that's silly, isn't it? Really. I mean, for 250, I should really waken up and not be so loyal and go elsewhere. And what else? The Shell one is 0.7 of a kilometre from my house. So what else is attracting me? The convenience factor. And also, when I go into the shop to pay for the petrol, there's a large machine there and it sells, guess what? Costa coffee. And Thank you, Year 11, Costa Coffee voucher. And because I like the odd Costa coffee, that attracts me as well. So there are also, no, that's not firms competing on price, that's firms competing on, how would you describe that? So, loyalty cards, vouchers. I got a Shell teddy bear once, which was nice. I should send that to it's my nephew's birthday.
Did you watch your videos?
It's my nephew's birthday. Hi Daniel. It's my nephew's birthday I phoned him last night. He's only 4, he's really clever. I phoned him last night and said, oh, when's your birthday? He said 15 days. He's absolutely right, 15. Isn't that clever for a 3-year-old? 15 days. But what I'm thinking is, wouldn't it be nice of me to send him for his birthday the free teddy bear that I got? That's a win-win, isn't it? That's just as bad as my former colleague who worked here, Mr. Jay Hunt, and it was my birthday, and he'd forgotten, and as he was driving up to the college, he called in to one of the petrol stations, and he had all these points on his card, and he realised it was my birthday, and he said, oh, to the vendor, what can I get for these points? And the only thing was a torch, and he gave me a torch for my birthday. Thank you, John. Thank you. Right, anything else? What about profit? So we've mentioned there non-price competition as being a big factor. I mean, this is why another oligopolistic market is supermarkets, isn't it? Tesco have their loyalty card, and you get your vouchers. I was watching a programme last night on Channel 5, it's a bit of a rip-off of Martin's money-saving supermarket. Something like Eat Well and Spend Well or something like that. But they were doing holidays, and you could use your Tesco vouchers to buy a holiday. So we've got non-price competition. What else?
I was going to say, you mentioned something about cartels forming.
Okay, so that's more to do with the whole notion of collusion and firms getting together to basically, when you get together, what's that song called? 2 become 1, or 4 become, no, 4 become 1, right. So when you get together and collude, you're getting together as a small number of large firms to basically act like one firm, which we would call a monopoly. So we'll come back to that whole notion. Anything else? Just about profit? Right, okay. So many of these firms, Tesco, Asda, and so on and so forth, they're making very substantial profits. Yes.
Would you say there is a little bit of price competition in like the supermarket industry, because you get like Tesco and Waitrose, which kind of have the unique selling point of being, almost more luxury, and then you get Lidl and Aldi.
Lidl's and Aldi's, yeah.
Who basically specialise on having really, really cheap things.
And of course, the arrival of Lidl's and Aldi's with their much reduced prices has greatly enhanced competition.
I think like the other ones like Sainsbury's and Asda's, who are all like in the middle, they're all like fairly non-price competitive. Like in comparison with like Tesco's and Waitrose compared to Aldi and Lidl, there is quite a big difference. What?
So I think it's Tesco. I think Tesco and Waitrose together. Like Waitrose and Barnes as well.
No, I don't think.
Well, it
it's
depends,
that
doesn't it?
much more
What
expensive
sort of things you're getting, I think.
Tesco.
Yes.
I would say Tesco and Waitrose are not too different, really.
That's
Where do you shop for them?
cool.
Are you a Waitrose man?
I've got a job with you on Monday.
Okay, but that's not the question I asked.
I do. No, I shop. Sainsbury's and Tesco. I find them differences.
Yeah, there are, but you're quite right to talk about pricing, because pricing in the supermarket industry is much more important, or almost as important, as non-price competitive factors. Whereas that's not necessarily the case in other oligopolistic markets, I think. That's very true. Okay. Now, let's see. I think that's probably sufficient in terms of the general characteristics. So now we need to get into the diagrams, the kinked demand curve, otherwise called the Sweezy model. Now, this diagram is unlike, really, it's unlike the perfect competition diagrams, it's unlike the monopolistic competition diagrams, it's unlike the... one of the students is firing things at me. It's unlike the other market structures diagrams.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
are you going to put the monopolistic competition oligopoly on tomorrow or not? Are you going to repeat the perfect market one?
Do you mean in terms of the diagrams?
The testing one, yeah. Which ones are you going to do?
Yeah, well, you need to know them all, don't you? So I'll do a selection box, if you will. What a treat! I'll do a selection box of all of them. Okay, let's get stuck into the diagram. So the diagram, as I've said, it's referred to as the kinked demand curve. You're not given any clues away there as to the shape of it, obviously. The kinked demand curve, aka the Sweezy model. Mr. Sweezy. Sweezy. S-W-E-E-Z-Y. Now, before we get into doing the sort of the kinks and the ARs and the MRs and the MCs, I think it's just important, first of all, to establish why we have a kink, first of all. That's the most important thing. And the most important thing probably in this particular section of analysis is to do with revenue, really, and what will happen to revenues when firms act in a certain way. Now, if you're in an oligopolistic market, that means, we've already said, there are a small number of large firms. So if you take Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Asda, who else have we got? Aldi, Lidl's, M&S, any others? Who? Farm Foods. Haven't heard of that one, have I? Farm Foods. Iceland. Let's leave it at that, 8.
Is it true that two brothers actually own Aldi and Lidl and they hate each other? That's why it's so competitive between them two.
I don't know.
Which it is.
Perhaps the viewers could get back to us on that one.
That isn't it.
Now, let's just stick with those 8 for the time being. Now, who's the biggest there? Tesco, just about. Now, we'll just put some very arbitrary numbers to this. So, Tesco, let's say they're about 30% total market share. It's high 20s. Then, who's next?
Sainsbury's and Asda.
Sainsbury's, Asda. Okay, let's call that about 25%. And let's say M&S. This is just for the purposes of an example, okay? So that's 55%. So, and let's call this M&S, let's call that 20%. So 30 plus 25 plus 20 gives 75%. Now, in oligopolistic markets, one thing that you get asked about in the exam quite often is you get asked about concentration ratios. Now, they might ask you, what's the 5-firm concentration ratio? Or what's the 3-firm concentration ratio? Now, in this one, the 3-firm concentration... put my teeth in this morning, forgot. The 3-firm concentration ratio here is 75%. In other words, the market is dominated by 3 large firms, and they're taking up 73/4 of that market for themselves. Which means there's only 25% left for Aldi's, Lidl's, Iceland and Waitrose, if we're using this example. So this would be the 3-firm concentration ratio. Now obviously, if you wanted to make that market, i.e. the supermarket industry, more competitive, would you want a high 3-firm concentration ratio or a low 3-firm concentration ratio? This is a very often asked question on exams. To make that market more competitive, do you want the 3-firm concentration ratio of those 3 to be more than 75 or less?
Less.
Exactly, less. Because that then leaves more room for other firms. So if this was 60% instead of 75, then that leaves 40% for the others. So to make it more competitive, you would be reducing the concentration ratio. That's quite an often asked micro A-level question for 2 marks. Calculate the 3-firm concentration ratio, tell us how to make it more competitive, or something like that. Okay, now, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, M&S, they are all competitors for one another, so they're all, another term for competitors. Thank you. Yes, if you would just leave it there, thank you. Merci.
Bye.
They're all, yes, somebody's whispering it. Sorry.
Substitute.
They're all, thank you Radhika, they're all substitutes for one another. Now Radhika, to just develop your knowledge there of that, what does that do to their demand curve?
Does it make it?
Makes it, in terms of elasticity,
Does it make it like inelastic? I mean elastic.
which do you mean?
Elastic.
Elastic, correct. So I want you to draw now please an elastic demand curve. Boom. And identify a price on it please, P star, Q star. Okay, now, let's just use the Tesco Sainsbury's. If I'm Tesco and I want to increase my proportion of the market, I want to increase my market share, well, I can either do what to my price? Don't know.
Pardon, sorry.
Excuse me.
I was a bit turned out, so.
I'll edit that out, thank you. I'll edit that out, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Dear oh dear. Right. There are two firms in this industry, Tesco and Sainsbury's. And in order to increase their market share, they can either increase the price or decrease it. What will they do?
And what they decrease their price.
Okay, well let's work with that one. Thank you, Daniel. Let's work with that one. Let's work with it. So Tesco decides that it will decrease price. Well, what will Sainsbury's do, Robert?
Decrease the price as well.
Exactly. So if Tesco decrease prices in order to increase revenue, which is the normal state of affairs if you've got substitute goods, if Tesco decrease prices, well, Sainsbury's, they're not stupid, so they will immediately, they'll be on their portable information devices looking up the prices, and you know that all these companies employ secret shoppers who go around in disguise and, you know, you've probably seen them in the aisles of Tesco and so on with a little notebook out and they're just writing down what the prices of things are very discreetly as they're walking around, doing a little bit of research. Sainsbury's, they'll be on that like a ton of bricks and they'll decrease their prices as well, so they will match that more than likely. So what will happen to the market share of both firms?
Will it not change?
Exactly, you're not going to do any, you're not going to gain anything. The only thing that's going to happen is, let's say Tesco used to have 2 customers, a boy and a girl, right? Obviously, what? What's it like?
I'm just wondering if the silence from. Why their heads attached to each other?
What?
The heads are like attached.
Okay, never mind. Now, before the price decrease, let's say the goods in question were like £10 each. So you've got 10 times 2, that's 20. After the price decrease, let's say it drops to 5, you've not gained any more customers, but now your price is cheaper. So what have you done there? By reducing your price, and then all your competitors just say, well, we'll reduce ours. So you're not doing yourself any favours, are you? You're just shooting yourself in the foot. You're just shooting yourself in the foot, okay? So for the oligopolistic firm, 9 times out of 10, reducing your prices is self-defeating. Because if you reduce yours, everyone else reduces theirs, nobody gains any more customers, except for maybe a very short period of time, and so you don't gain any more revenue. So price reductions are self-defeating. Because you're just losing revenue.